Hello, YouTube, and welcome to Story Movies, or if you're revisiting, welcome back. Today, we're going over part 2 of What If Deku Had All 4 Mortal Kombat Ninja Powers. I think I'm gonna rename this series to What If Deku Was Half Shirai Ryu and Lin Kuei. Anyway, thanks for dropping in for this amazing story. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe so you never miss a video. Now, let's begin. Episode 7. Title: Family Matter. Location: outside the Midoriya residence. Night. The aftermath of Inko Midoriya's tragic death was a blur for Izuku. The house, once filled with warmth and the sounds of his mother's teachings, was now a somber place of loss. And authorities were bustling around, but Izuku felt isolated in his grief and newfound power. The fire he had summoned earlier was now under control, but the emotional blaze within him raged on. Amid this turmoil, a familiar face appeared, a beacon of hope amid the darkness. Mitsuki Bakugo, the mother of Izuku's school friend Katsuki Bakugo, had heard of the tragedy and arrived to offer support. Mitsuki, known for her fierce determination and compassion, was a longtime friend of Inko, and her presence brought a glimmer of comfort. Location: Midoriya family home. Later that night, Mitsuki found Izuku sitting outside with firefighters and police officers surrounded by the remnants of his mother's belongings. Mitsuki approached gently, her heart aching for the boy who had lost so much. "Hey, Izuku," Mitsuki said softly, kneeling beside him. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were filled with concern. "I'm so sorry about your mom. I can't imagine what you're going through." Izuku looked up, his eyes red and filled with a mixture of sadness and confusion. "Thank you, Mrs. Mitsuki-san," he whispered. "I don't know what to do now." Mitsuki placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "I've been talking with the authorities, and they've asked me to take care of you for now. If you're willing, I'd like to adopt you, Izuku. You need a stable home, and I want to help you through this." Izuku's eyes widened in surprise. The offer was both overwhelming and comforting. Mitsuki's presence and the prospect of a new home were a stark contrast to the isolation he had felt. I'd like that," Izuku said softly, nodding. "Thank you." Location: Bakugo family home. The next day, Izuku moved in with the Bakugo family the following day. The transition was difficult, but Mitsuki's warm welcome and Katsuki's supportive, albeit rough, attitude provided a semblance of normalcy. The Bakugo household was different from what Izuku had known, but it was a place where he felt safe and cared for. Mitsuki worked hard to make Izuku feel at home. She made sure he had his own space, filled with reminders of his past, and encouraged him to talk about his feelings. She was patient and understanding, knowing that healing from such a loss would take time. Location: Bakugo family home. Evening. As days turned into weeks, Izuku gradually adapted to his new life. Mitsuki and Katsuki were there to support him, helping him navigate the challenges of his new circumstances. Mitsuki, ever perceptive, noticed the flickers of firepower that occasionally manifested when Izuku was emotionally charged. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Mitsuki spoke up. "Izuku, I know things have been tough, but I want you to know that we're here for you. If you need anything, whether it's talking, training, or just a place to vent, don't hesitate to ask." Izuku nodded, feeling a sense of belonging he hadn't felt since his mother's death. "Thank you, Mitsuki-san. It means a lot to me." Mitsuki smiled warmly, her eyes reflecting both kindness and resolve. "We're family now, Izuku. And family supports each other, no matter what." As the evening drew to a close, Izuku felt a renewed sense of hope. His new life with the Bakugo family was a new chapter, one where he could heal, grow, and harness the powers awakened by his loss. With Mitsuki's guidance and Katsuki's support, Izuku was ready to face the future and honor the memory of his mother by embracing his newfound abilities and forging ahead on his journey to become a hero. Location: Bakugo family home. Early morning. 3 months had passed since Izuku Midoriya moved in with the Bakugo family. The trauma of losing his mother and the fire that had consumed his old home still weighed heavily on him. Mitsuki's offer of adoption and the support of her family had provided him with a sense of stability, but life with his new family was not without its challenges. Izuku's first morning in the Bakugo home was a mix of hope and anxiety. As he prepared for his day at school, he encountered Katsuki Bakugo, whose demeanor was as brash and confrontational as ever. Location: Bakugo family home, kitchen. Izuku entered the kitchen where Katsuki was already eating breakfast. The atmosphere was tense, with Katsuki's usual scowl firmly in place. Mitsuki had tried to encourage Katsuki to be supportive, but old habits were hard to break. "Hey, Deku," Katsuki said with a sneer, not bothering to look up from his breakfast. "How's the fire starter doing today?" Izuku, trying to keep his composure, responded with a forced smile. "Good morning, Katsuki." Katsuki's eyes narrowed as he looked at Izuku. "So, what's it like living in a place where you can't burn it down? Bet you're just itching to set something on fire again." Izuku's smile faltered, but he tried to brush off the remark. "I'm just trying to get used to things here." Katsuki snorted. "Yeah, well, don't think you're special just because you're living with us now. You're still the same old Deku. And don't think I'll go easy on you just because of what happened." Despite his words, Katsuki's aggression was tinged with a hint of curiosity and begrudging respect. He wasn't sure how to handle Izuku's new situation, especially with the powers that had surfaced. Location: elementary school. Later that day, at school, the tension continued. Katsuki's bullying behavior towards Izuku persisted, exacerbated by his frustration over Izuku's seemingly sudden rise in power. Katsuki saw the new abilities as a challenge to his superiority and took every opportunity to assert his dominance. During recess, Katsuki approached Izuku with a group of his friends, his usual swagger on full display. "So, Deku," Katsuki taunted, "how's it feel to be living in a fancy house now? Think you're some kind of hero now that you've got new powers?" Izuku, trying to ignore the provocation, focused on his task of practicing control over his powers in secret. He was more determined than ever to master them and honor his mother's memory. "I'm just trying to focus on my studies and get through each day." Katsuki's friends snickered, adding to the humiliation. "Yeah, sure. Just remember, Deku, you're not special because of some fire tricks. You're still the same weakling." Despite the taunts, Izuku remained silent. He knew that reacting to Katsuki's bullying would only fuel the fire. Instead, he channeled his energy into his training, determined to rise above the negativity. Location: Bakugo family home, evening. Back at the Bakugo home, Mitsuki noticed the strain on Izuku's face. She approached him gently as he sat alone in his room, lost in thought. "Hey, Izuku," Mitsuki said softly. "How was school today?" Izuku forced a smile. "It was fine, Mitsuki-san." Mitsuki could see through his facade. "I know it's tough dealing with Katsuki. He can be difficult. But I want you to remember that you're not alone. We're here for you." Izuku nodded, appreciating her support. "Thank you, Mitsuki-san. I just want to get through this and make the most of my new life." Mitsuki placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You're doing great, Izuku. And remember, no matter how hard it gets, you have a family who cares about you. We'll get through this together." Episode 8. Title: A Connection Rekindled. Location: Bakugo family home, Izuku's room, night. Izuku Midoriya lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as the day's events replayed in his mind. The loss of his mother and the relentless bullying from Katsuki had taken their toll. Seeking some solace and clarity, he decided to meditate, a practice his mother had taught him to help manage his powers. As he settled into his meditative state, he felt a familiar sensation of drifting away from the physical world, entering a realm where time and space seemed to bend. The room around him dissolved into an expansive, fiery landscape, reflecting the intense heat of his newly awakened powers. The air crackled with energy, and the atmosphere was thick with the scent of sulfur and burning embers. Location: dream-like realm, fiery temple. In this dream-like realm, Izuku found himself in a grand, ancient temple surrounded by molten lava and flickering flames. The temple's architecture was a blend of ancient elegance and brutal strength, adorned with symbols of the Shirai Ryu, his father's clan, known for their mastery over fire. As he walked through the temple, the fiery ambiance resonated with the power now coursing through him. His heart raced with anticipation and respect. At the center of the temple, amidst the searing heat and glowing embers, stood a figure draped in dark, battle-worn robes, the embodiment of the Shirai Ryu's fierce legacy. Hanzo Hasashi, Scorpion, stood with an aura of commanding presence. "Welcome, Izuku." Scorpion's voice was both authoritative and soothing, cutting through the roar of the flames. "I have been expecting you." Izuku approached, feeling a mix of awe and nervousness. "Hanzo. I mean, Scorpion, it's an honor to meet you." Scorpion nodded, his gaze intense yet kind. "The honor is mine, young warrior. I sense the turmoil within you, the pain of loss and the struggle to control your newfound fire powers. I am here to help you forge your path." Izuku nodded, his voice filled with earnest determination. "I want to learn how to control these powers, to harness the fire within me without letting it consume me." Scorpion's eyes softened with understanding. Fire, like emotion, can be both a great ally and a formidable adversary. To master it, you must first understand it. The flames you wield are a legacy of the Shirai Ryu, a lineage of warriors bound by strength and honor. Scorpion guided Izuku through a series of training exercises that were both physically demanding and mentally rigorous. The exercises involved controlling the intensity of the fire, creating precise bursts of flames, and channeling the fire's energy in a controlled manner. Each movement was fluid yet powerful, reflecting the Shirai Ryu's grace and ferocity. As they trained, Scorpion shared stories of his own struggles and victories, allowing Izuku to connect with him on a deeper level. He spoke of battles fought, sacrifices made, and the unyielding spirit of the Shirai Ryu. Through these stories, Izuku felt a profound bond forming, a connection to his father's lineage and the legacy he was now part of. Scorpion, his form a figure of both fiery intensity and profound wisdom, began to speak. "Izuku, there is something crucial about your family's history that you need to understand, especially concerning your father and me." Izuku looked up at Scorpion, his heart heavy with both sadness and curiosity. "You mean, you're my great-grandfather, right? What was my father like, and what about you?" Scorpion's eyes softened as he began to speak of his legacy. "Yes, I am your great-grandfather, Hanzo Hasashi, the former leader of the Shirai Ryu. Your father, Hasashi, was my grandson. He inherited the fiery strength of our clan but chose a different path, seeking a life beyond the conflicts that plagued our history." Izuku's expression reflected his sadness and confusion. "I didn't know much about him. He left when I was very young." Scorpion nodded, understanding Izuku's emotions. "Hasashi chose to leave the Shirai Ryu to create a new life with your mother. His decision was not an easy one. He wanted to shield you and your mother from the violence and turmoil that had defined our lives. His sacrifice was a testament to his love and hope for a future free from the bloodshed." Izuku's voice wavered. "I wish I could have known him better. I want to honor both him and my mother." Scorpion placed a reassuring hand on Izuku's shoulder. "You honor their memory by embracing the legacy they passed down to you. My choice to protect my family and your father's decision to seek a different life were driven by our love and hopes for you. By mastering your powers and using them for good, you continue our legacy." Izuku's determination solidified as he spoke. "I understand now. It's not just about the powers of inherited, but about respecting their choices and sacrifices. I want to make a difference and live up to their expectations." Scorpion's gaze was filled with pride and encouragement. "You are on the right path, Izuku. The fire within you is not just a part of your heritage but a beacon of our family's strength. Embrace this fire, let it guide you, and use it to forge a future that honors our sacrifices." As the fiery temple began to fade, signaling the end of their meeting, Izuku felt a profound connection to his family's past and a renewed sense of purpose. The strength and wisdom of his ancestors were now a part of him, guiding him as he faced the challenges ahead. Location: Bakugo family home, Izuku's room, early morning. Izuku awoke from the dream-like state with a newfound sense of purpose and clarity. The training with Scorpion had been transformative, deepening his understanding of his fire abilities and solidifying his connection to his ancestral legacy. As he prepared for the day, Izuku reflected on the bond he had forged with his great-grandfather's spirit. He felt more confident in his abilities and was determined to honor both his mother's and father's legacies. With renewed strength, he was ready to face the challenges ahead, knowing he carried the fierce and unbreakable spirit of the Shirai Ryu within him. Episode 8. Title: Clash Within the Walls. Location: Bakugo Household. The Bakugo household was in turmoil as Izuku and Bakugo clashed furiously in the living room. The normally neat space had become a chaotic battleground. Scorch marks and shattered furniture were scattered across the floor as the two friends turned rivals unleashed their powers. Bakugo, his face twisted in rage, threw another explosive burst towards Izuku. "You think you're something special now. You're still just Deku to me." Izuku, his eyes fierce with determination, dodged and retaliated with a stream of flames. "I'm not trying to be special. I'm just defending myself." The fight escalated quickly. Bakugo's explosions rocked the room, sending bits of furniture and debris flying everywhere. Izuku countered with his fire and smoke powers, using them to shield himself and push Bakugo back. The smoke billowed thickly, creating a haze that only fueled Bakugo's frustration. Amidst the chaos, Bakugo's rage seemed to only grow. He blasted through the smoke, the room shaking with each explosion. "I won't let you get the best of me." Izuku's sweat dripped as he tried to control his fire and smoke, but the intensity of Bakugo's attacks made it difficult. "This isn't helping. We need to stop." Suddenly, the door to the living room burst open. Mitsuki and her husband, who had been in another part of the house, rushed in. Their eyes widened in shock at the sight of the destruction. Mitsuki's face went pale as she took in the scene. "Katsuki, what is going on here?" Mitsuki's husband, his expression a mix of concern and anger, quickly assessed the damage. "What in the world happened? This place looks like a disaster zone." Izuku, panting heavily, turned to Mitsuki with a mix of guilt and frustration. "I'm sorry. Bakugo and I were fighting, and it just got out of hand." Bakugo, still fuming, glared at his mother. "It's not just my fault. Deku started it." Mitsuki's eyes flashed with anger as she looked between the two boys. "This is unacceptable. You've turned our home into a wreck. You both need to learn how to handle your anger without causing this kind of damage." Mitsuki's husband nodded in agreement. "Both of you are grounded. And you'll be helping clean up this mess. This kind of behavior is not going to be tolerated." As the mother and husband began assessing the damage, Izuku and Bakugo stood in the middle of the wreckage, realizing the gravity of their actions. The room, now a symbol of their uncontrolled emotions, bore the marks of their clash. Izuku and Bakugo helped clean up the debris, their earlier anger replaced by a sense of remorse. The fight had shown them that they needed to find better ways to handle their conflicts and control their powers. The realization of the consequences settled in as they worked side by side, understanding the need for change and responsibility. Title: Clash Within the Walls. Location: Bakugo household, late evening. The once chaotic living room had been cleaned up, though signs of the earlier battle remained etched into the walls and floor. Izuku and Bakugo were each sent to their respective rooms as a consequence of their destructive fight. The stern expressions of Mitsuki and her husband left no room for argument. Izuku, feeling a mix of anger and regret, sat on the edge of his bed, trying to calm his racing thoughts. The adrenaline from the fight had left him restless, but he knew he needed to take this time to reflect. A few minutes later, the door to Bakugo's room creaked open. Bakugo, still fuming from the fight but with a smirk on his face, walked into Izuku's room uninvited. "Well, look at you, Deku," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "How's the little hero doing after making such a mess?" Izuku looked up, his expression weary. "What do you want, Katsuki?" Bakugo strolled over and leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. "Just wanted to see how you're doing after getting your ass handed to you. Didn't think you had it in you to make a scene like that." Izuku's eyes flashed with annoyance, but he tried to keep his cool. "I didn't start that fight. You did." Bakugo chuckled darkly. "Yeah, well, you didn't exactly back down, did you? Maybe you're getting a little too confident with those new powers of yours." Izuku clenched his fists, fighting to keep his temper in check. "I'm not trying to be confident or anything. I'm just trying to get through this." Bakugo's smirk widened. "Right, sure. But don't think you're off the hook just because we're grounded. I'm still gonna make sure you remember who's in charge." Izuku's frustration bubbled up, but he took a deep breath to steady himself. "I don't need you to remind me of anything, Katsuki. I'm just trying to deal with things the best I can." Bakugo rolled his eyes, clearly enjoying the discomfort he was causing. "Whatever you say. Just remember, Deku, you're not as hot as you think you are. You've still got a long way to go before you're worth anything." Izuku, struggling to keep his composure, responded quietly, "Maybe so. But I'm not going to let you push me around forever." Bakugo snorted, shaking his head. "We'll see about that. But for now, enjoy your time in your room. I'm sure you'll be just fine, if you can handle it." With a final, mocking grin, Bakugo turned and left, leaving Izuku alone to stew in his thoughts. The door closed behind him, and the silence of the room allowed Izuku to finally release the breath he'd been holding. As Izuku lay back on his bed, the weight of his mother's death and the recent fight pressed heavily on him. Despite Bakugo's taunts, he knew he needed to find a way to move forward and use his powers responsibly. The clash with Bakugo had been a harsh reminder of the challenges he faced, but it also strengthened his resolve to rise above the difficulties and honor the legacy he carried. Location: elementary school, morning. The next morning, Izuku Midoriya awoke to a new day. The previous night's turmoil felt like a distant memory as he prepared for school. He had managed to get a decent amount of rest despite the emotional strain, and he was determined to face the day with a clear head. At school, Izuku walked into the bustling classroom, his backpack slung over one shoulder. The atmosphere was lively with students chatting and getting ready for the day's lessons. Izuku took a deep breath and entered the room, trying to put on a brave face despite the lingering pain from his recent struggles. As he made his way to his desk, he noticed several classmates who would later become significant figures in his journey to UA High School. First, there was Ochako Uraraka, who was already showing signs of her cheerful and bubbly personality. She was surrounded by a small group of friends, her laughter ringing out as she shared a funny story. Her warm smile was infectious, and she greeted Izuku with a friendly wave when she noticed him. "Hi there, I'm Ochako. You must be Izuku, right? I've seen you around." Izuku, surprised by her friendliness, nodded. "Yeah, that's me. Nice to meet you, Ochako." Next, he noticed Tenya Iida, who was diligently organizing his books at his desk. His serious demeanor and neat appearance were evident even at this young age. When he saw Izuku, he straightened up and extended a hand in greeting. "Hello, Izuku Midoriya. I am Tenya Iida. It is a pleasure to meet you. I trust you will be prepared for the lessons ahead. Izuku shook Tenya's hand with a smile. Nice to meet you, Tenya. I'm sure today will be good. As Izuku continued to settle in, he spotted Katsuki Bakugo entering the classroom. Unlike the previous day's confrontation, Bakugo was in a more subdued mood. He glanced around and, seeing Izuku, scowled slightly but didn't engage in any further hostility. Instead, he took his seat with a huff and turned his attention to his work. The day's classes began, and Izuku found himself adjusting to the routine of elementary school life. Despite the recent turmoil and Bakugo's ongoing antagonism, he felt a sense of normalcy in the classroom environment. The teachers were friendly, and his classmates seemed to be a supportive group. During recess, Izuku sat under a tree, trying to relax and enjoy the break. Ochako approached him, carrying a small snack. Hey, Izuku, mind if I sit with you? Izuku welcomed the company, and soon they were chatting about their interests and favorite subjects. Tenya joined them shortly, and the trio spent the rest of recess talking and laughing. As the day progressed, Izuku felt a growing sense of hope. Meeting his future classmates, who would play important roles in his journey to UA. High school gave him a glimpse of the friendships and alliances he would form along the way. Despite the challenges he faced, the support and camaraderie he found in these new connections offered him comfort and motivation. Location: local playground, late afternoon. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the playground. Izuku Midoriya wandered, still dressed in his school uniform, his mind clouded with thoughts of the past few days. The playground was mostly empty, the laughter of distant children echoing faintly. It was a peaceful spot, yet today, it felt heavy with memories. As he walked, Izuku noticed a familiar figure sitting on one of the swings, alone. The boy's distinctive hair, half white, half red, was unmistakable. Izuku's heart skipped a beat as he recognized him. Shoto Todoroki, the boy he had met briefly on a hike with his mother years ago. Shoto, Izuku called out hesitantly as he approached. The boy looked up, his mismatched eyes locking onto Izuku's. There was a flicker of recognition in Shoto's gaze before he nodded slightly. Izuku, right? Izuku smiled, feeling a bit of the tension ease. Yeah, it's me. I didn't expect to see you here. Shoto gave a small shrug, his expression guarded. I come here sometimes. It's quiet. Izuku nodded and sat on the swing next to Shoto's. They both gently rocked back and forth in silence for a few moments, the creaking of the swings the only sound between them. I remember that hike, Shoto said suddenly, his voice low. You were with your mother. Izuku's heart ached at the mention of his mother. He had tried to push the memories of her out of his mind, but they always lingered, just beneath the surface. Yeah, she loved taking me on hikes. She said it was a way to clear the mind. Shoto was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the ground. I remember her being kind. She smiled a lot. Izuku's eyes stung with tears that he quickly blinked away. She was everything to me. Shoto turned to look at him, and the usual coldness in his eyes softened. What happened to her? Izuku swallowed hard, the memory of that day still raw. She was killed. By people from her past. I didn't even know she had such a dangerous history until it was too late. Shoto's expression darkened with empathy. I'm sorry. I can't imagine what that must be like. Izuku nodded, his voice trembling slightly. It's been really hard. I feel like I lost a part of myself when she died. She was the one who taught me about my powers, who believed in me when no one else did. Shoto's grip on the swing's chains tightened. My family's different. My father, he's not like your mother. He's always pushed me, demanding that I be the best, to surpass him. It's like I'm just a tool for his ambitions. My mother, she's not well, and I can't even see her. Izuku looked at Shoto with a mix of surprise and sympathy. I had no idea. That sounds really tough. Shoto's gaze grew distant as he spoke, his voice filled with a quiet bitterness. My father is the number 2 hero, Endeavor. He's obsessed with becoming number 1, surpassing all might. And he sees me as the key to achieving that. But it's not about what I want. It's about what he wants. Izuku's heart ached for Shoto. It sounds like we both have heavy legacies to carry. Shoto nodded slowly. Yeah, but it's different for you. You had someone who cared about you, and who wanted the best for you. My father, he only cares about power, about his glory. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever be more than just his weapon. Izuku felt a surge of empathy for Shoto. But you're more than that, Shoto. You're your own person, and you can choose your own path. You don't have to follow his plans. Shoto looked at Izuku, his eyes filled with a mix of uncertainty and hope. I don't know if it's that simple. My father, he's relentless. Izuku nodded. I get it, but I believe you can find your own way, just like I'm trying to do. We don't have to be defined by our parents' expectations or their mistakes. Shoto was silent for a long moment, processing Izuku's words. You're stronger than you look, Izuku. Not just because of your powers, but because of how you handle everything. Izuku smiled faintly. Thanks, Shoto. I think we both have our strengths. Maybe we can help each other find our own way. Shoto glanced at Izuku, a small, rare smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Maybe. It'd be nice to have someone who understands. They sat in silence for a while longer, the sun continuing its descent in the sky. For the first time in a long while, both boys felt a sense of connection, of understanding. They were different in many ways, but their shared experiences of family trauma and the pressure of living up to their legacies gave them a unique bond. Eventually, Shoto stood up, brushing the dirt from his pants. I should get going. My father will be expecting me. Izuku nodded, standing as well. Yeah, I should head home too. As they began to walk in separate directions, Shoto paused and looked back at Izuku. Maybe we'll see each other again. Izuku smiled, his heart feeling lighter than it had in a long time. Yeah, I'd like that. And with that, they parted ways, each carrying a little less of their burdens, knowing they weren't alone in their struggles. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the dense woods near Musudafu. The forest was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. Amid the towering trees, 6 young heroes in training stood in a clearing, the excitement of the heroes' fancon still buzzing in their veins. Izuku Midoriya, Katsuki Bakugo, Shoto Todoroki, Momo Yaoyorozu, Ochako Uraraka, and Tenya Iida had wandered away from the crowded convention center, seeking a place to unwind and, more importantly, to share their progress with one another. The secluded woods offered them the perfect spot, far from prying eyes and interruptions. Katsuki Bakugo, ever the impatient one, was the first to break the silence. All right, extras, let's see what you've got. Show me how much you've improved. Starting with the weakest power and working up. Izuku nodded, understanding that this was Bakugo's way of both challenging and gauging their growth. Sounds good, Kachan. Let's show each other how far we've come. Momo, ever the strategist, suggested, how about we each showcase a couple of techniques, starting with our simplest moves. The group agreed, and after some quick discussions, Ochako volunteered to go first. She stepped forward, her face determined yet cheerful. All right, I'll start, Ochako said, taking a deep breath. She gently touched a nearby rock, activating her quirk. The rock slowly floated into the air, suspended in weightlessness. With a flick of her wrist, she sent it sailing smoothly through the air before letting it gently touch the ground. And for something a bit stronger. Ochako focused, her eyes narrowing as she increased the intensity of her quirk. This time, she picked up multiple rocks and even a fallen branch, sending them spiraling upward into the sky. With another swift motion, she brought them crashing down with a controlled force, demonstrating her improved finesse. Nice one, Uraraka, Izuku cheered, impressed by her control. Not bad, Bakugo grumbled, though his expression betrayed a hint of approval. Next up was Tenya. He assumed his starting position, planting his feet firmly on the ground. Recipro burst. He shouted, his calves glowing. With blue energy, Tenya shot forward, his movements a blur as he zipped around the clearing in controlled bursts of speed. He stopped abruptly, the ground beneath his feet slightly scorched from the friction. And now, the enhanced version, Tenya announced, his engine thrumming louder. He activated his quirk again, this time unleashing a sustained burst of speed that sent him rocketing through the trees, zigzagging between trunks with incredible precision. He finally skidded to a halt, breathing heavily but with a satisfied grin on his face. "Damn, you've gotten faster," Kirishima remarked, impressed. Momo stepped forward next, her expression focused. "My turn," she said. Reaching into her exposed skin, she quickly created a simple bow staff, twirling it expertly before demonstrating a few fluid movements. She followed this up by generating a small cannon, her quirk's adaptability on full display. For something stronger, Momo concentrated harder, sweat beading on her forehead as she produced a large, complex shield, thick and sturdy, something that could withstand a heavy assault. She hefted it with surprising ease, demonstrating her strength and the advanced nature of her creations. "Well done, Yaoyorozu," Tenya praised, always appreciative of her creativity and resourcefulness. Shoto Todoroki stepped forward next, his heterochromatic eyes calm as he prepared to demonstrate his powers. He raised his right hand, and a trail of frost spread across the ground, forming intricate patterns that glistened in the fading sunlight. The temperature in the area dropped slightly, the chill from his quirk palpable. Without hesitation, Shoto raised his left hand, summoning a small flame in his palm. The contrast between ice and fire was striking, a visual representation of his dual nature. "For my stronger move," Shoto closed his eyes momentarily, focusing deeply. The flames in his left hand roared to life, expanding rapidly. At the same time, a thick wall of ice erupted from the ground with his right hand, towering over them. The sheer size and intensity of the display left the group in awe. Still holding back, "I see," Bakugo muttered, though there was no malice in his tone, only respect for Shoto's raw power. Finally, it was Izuku's turn. He stepped forward, nerves buzzing with both excitement and a slight edge of apprehension. He had come a long way since his quirk first manifested, and now he was eager to show his friends what he was capable of. "I'll start with my smoke abilities," Izuku said, taking a deep breath. He raised his hands, and a thick, inky cloud of smoke began to billow from his palms, spreading across the clearing. The smoke swirled around the group, completely obscuring their vision. Izuku manipulated the smoke with ease, creating tendrils that danced through the air before dispersing into the breeze. "Now, something stronger," Izuku continued, his expression more serious. He focused, and the smoke condensed around him, forming a dense shroud that made him nearly invisible. Then, with a sharp motion, he sent the smoke blasting outward in a powerful shockwave, clearing the area and revealing him standing tall, his eyes glowing with determination. "Not bad, Deku," Bakugo admitted, though his tone was still challenging. "But what else you got?" Izuku nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Next, my ice." He raised his hands again, and the air around him dropped in temperature. Frost spread across the ground, encasing the grass in a thin layer of ice. Izuku then created a sharp, jagged spear of ice, twirling it with surprising dexterity before launching it into a nearby tree. The spear embedded itself deeply into the trunk, a testament to the power behind it. For the stronger version, Izuku clenched his fists, and a massive pillar of ice shot up from the ground, towering over the group. The structure was complex, with intricate designs etched into the ice, a tribute to the techniques he had learned from his mother. "Impressive, Midoriya," Shoto acknowledged, appreciating the control Izuku had over his abilities. Finally, Izuku took a deep breath. And now, my fire. He extended his hand, summoning a small, controlled flame in his palm, the flickering light contrasting with the lingering cold from his previous display. He let the flame grow, feeding it with his focus until it was a blazing orb in his hand. For the stronger move, Izuku's face hardened with concentration. He released the flame, which expanded rapidly, forming a swirling vortex of fire around him. The heat was intense, the flames licking at the air as they danced with a life of their own. With a swift motion, Izuku directed the fire into the sky, where it erupted in a brilliant display of fiery power. The clearing fell silent, the only sound being the crackling of fading embers and the distant rustling of leaves. Each of them had demonstrated their progress, showing just how far they had come since their first steps into the world of heroes. Not bad, Deku, Bakugo finally said, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. You've gotten stronger. Izuku grinned, feeling a surge of pride. Thanks, Kachan. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows through the trees as the group stood in the clearing, their hearts pounding with excitement and the thrill of their shared progress. Each of them had a long way to go, but they knew that with continued training and support from each other, they could reach even greater heights. And as they left the woods, heading back toward the city, there was a silent understanding between them, a bond forged through shared struggle and the pursuit of their dreams. Episode 9. Title: Sparring in the Woods. Location: forest clearing near Musudafu. Dusk. The golden hues of the setting sun filtered through the dense canopy of trees, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The air was cool and crisp, a perfect evening for training. In the middle of a secluded clearing, two figures stood opposite each other, their postures tense but familiar, Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo. The two boys had been sparring together for years, their rivalry as fierce as ever, though recently, there had been a subtle shift in their dynamic. Bakugo, while still as brash and cocky as ever, seemed to have developed a grudging respect for Izuku. Yet, he never missed an opportunity to remind Izuku of his place, in his own harsh way. All right, Deku, Bakugo sneered, cracking his knuckles as small explosions popped from his palms. Let's see what you've got this time. Don't think just because you've got a few new tricks that you can beat me. I'm still stronger, and you're still just Deku. Izuku took a deep breath, calming his nerves. He knew Bakugo's taunts were as much a part of their routine as the sparring itself. But he was determined to prove himself, not just to Bakugo, but to himself. Let's go, Kachan, Izuku replied, his voice steady. He raised his hands, feeling the familiar rush of energy as his powers activated. Without warning, Bakugo lunged forward, his palms crackling with explosive energy. Die, he shouted, unleashing a barrage of small explosions aimed directly at Izuku. Izuku reacted quickly, summoning a thick cloud of smoke to obscure Bakugo's vision. The smoke billowed out, covering the entire clearing in a dark, swirling mist. Bakugo skidded to a halt, his eyes narrowing as he tried to locate Izuku within the smokescreen. Trying to hide, huh? Bakugo growled, his tone both annoyed and impressed. You think that'll work on me? He thrust his hand forward, unleashing a concentrated blast that dissipated the smoke in an instant, revealing Izuku standing a few feet away, his eyes focused and determined. Izuku didn't wait for Bakugo's next move. He extended his hand, and the temperature in the clearing dropped sharply. Frost spread across the ground, racing toward Bakugo with incredible speed. In an instant, ice spikes shot up from the ground, aiming to trap Bakugo where he stood. But Bakugo was quick. With a powerful explosion from his palms, he launched himself into the air, avoiding the ice spikes by a hair's breadth. He twisted in midair, aiming another blast directly at Izuku. Izuku raised an ice barrier just in time, the explosion hitting the frozen wall with a loud crack. The barrier shattered, but it absorbed most of the impact, allowing Izuku to counter with a quick burst of flame from his hand. The fire shot out, not as intense as his other abilities but strong enough to force Bakugo to dodge. Bakugo landed on the ground, smirking despite himself. Using fire now, Deku. Guess you're finally getting serious, Bakugo taunted, though there was an edge of approval in his voice. Izuku didn't respond with words. Instead, he dashed forward, using his smoke to mask his approach. As he closed in on Bakugo, he unleashed a flurry of ice-enhanced punches, his fists leaving trails of frost in the air. Bakugo met him head-on, blocking and countering with his explosive power. The clearing was filled with the sounds of blasts and the crackling of ice, the two boys locked in a fierce, fast-paced battle. Despite Bakugo's relentless aggression, Izuku held his ground, using his powers in combination to keep up with Bakugo's relentless onslaught. After several exchanges, Bakugo managed to create some distance between them with a powerful explosion. He landed a few feet away, panting slightly but still grinning. "You've gotten better, Deku," Bakugo admitted, though his tone was still laced with arrogance. "But you're still not good enough to beat me." Izuku, breathing heavily, wiped the sweat from his brow. He knew Bakugo was strong, and their sparring sessions always pushed him to his limits. But he wasn't about to back down. "We'll see about that, Kachan," Izuku replied, his voice firm. He summoned another wave of smoke, this time mixing it with the cold air to create a dense, icy fog that covered the entire clearing. Bakugo's grin widened. "Bring it on," he yelled, charging into the fog with his explosions blazing. The two boys clashed again, their powers colliding in a chaotic display of smoke, ice, and fire. Each attack was met with a counter, each movement pushing them both to new heights. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the clearing became a battlefield of light and shadow, the air filled with the crackling of Bakugo's explosions and the sharp, cold hiss of Izuku's ice. Finally, after what felt like hours, the two boys broke apart, both breathing heavily, their clothes scorched and torn. The clearing was a mess of frozen ground, scorched earth, and lingering smoke. Bakugo, still panting, looked at Izuku with a mixture of exhaustion and respect. "Not bad, Deku, not bad at all," he admitted, though he couldn't resist adding, "but don't get cocky. I'm still gonna win next time." Izuku smiled, wiping some dirt from his face. "We'll see, Kachan, we'll see." With the fight over, the tension between them eased slightly. Despite the harsh words and the intense battle, there was an unspoken understanding between the two. They were rivals, yes, but they were also pushing each other to be better, to reach new heights. As they made their way back to Bakugo's house, the sun completely set, leaving the forest in darkness. But both boys knew that their rivalry would continue, driving them forward. As they chased their dreams of becoming the greatest heroes. Title: The Inheritance. Location: Bakugo household, evening. It had been a few weeks since the sparring session in the woods, and life had returned to its regular rhythm for Izuku Midoriya. However, the weight of his mother's death still lingered in his heart, a constant reminder of the legacy he now carried. Living with the Bakugos had been a challenge, but Mitsuki Bakugo had done her best to make him feel at home, despite the tension that often arose between him and Katsuki. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the Bakugo household, Mitsuki called Izuku into the living room. Her face was softer than usual, a hint of concern in her eyes as she held a medium-sized, weathered box in her hands. "Izuku," Mitsuki began, her voice gentle. "I received this today. It's from a storage facility that your mother had in her name. It seems to be some of your family's things, from before." Izuku's heart skipped a beat as he stared at the box. The edges were worn, and the top was sealed with a faded label bearing his mother's handwriting. He hadn't expected anything like this, memories and items from a past his mother had always kept hidden from him. Mitsuki handed him the box, her hands lingering for a moment as if to offer silent support. I thought you should be the one to go through it. Just take your time, okay? Izuku nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. Thank you, Aunt Mitsuki. He carried the box up to his room, each step feeling heavier than the last. Once inside, he closed the door quietly and set the box on his bed. The room was dim, the only light coming from the small desk lamp that cast a warm glow over the worn cardboard. With a deep breath, Izuku carefully opened the box. Inside, he found an array of items: old photographs of his parents, some documents, a few pieces of clothing, and then, at the bottom, something wrapped in a thick, dark cloth. His hands trembled slightly as he unwrapped the cloth. What lay inside took his breath away: a pair of intricately designed swords, their handles etched with symbols he didn't recognize but somehow felt familiar. Alongside them was a shorter blade, no longer than a foot, attached to a coiled rope. The craftsmanship was exquisite, the metal gleaming even in the dim light. He recognized the weapon instantly from the stories he had heard in his dreams, and from the recent visitations by Hanzo Hasashi, his great-grandfather, Scorpion. This was the kunai blade, the iconic weapon used by the legendary ninja himself. The dual swords, too, seemed to hum with an ancient power, their origins clear in Izuku's mind. These were the weapons of the Shirai Ryu, the clan that had been wiped out, leaving only a legacy of fire and vengeance. Izuku's fingers traced the hilt of the kunai, a shiver running down his spine as memories, not his own, flashed through his mind. He could almost feel the weight of history pressing down on him, the stories of battles fought and lives lost, the legacy of a clan that had risen from the ashes. Suddenly, a tear slipped down his cheek. He hadn't just inherited his parents' powers, he had inherited their burdens, their unfinished business, and their hopes for him. But he wasn't alone. His mother's presence lingered in these items, and his father's spirit burned within him. Even Hanzo, the specter of a grandfather he had never known, seemed to watch over him. Izuku took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the fire inside him, the same fire that had awakened in his moment of deepest despair. The weapons weren't just tools. They were a reminder of who he was and who he could become. He wasn't just a boy with quirks, he was the heir to a powerful legacy. Carefully, Izuku wrapped the weapons and placed them back in the box, but not before tying the kunai blade's rope around his wrist. It was a symbol of the path he would walk, a promise to himself and to those who had come before him. As he closed the box, a new resolve took hold of him. He would train harder, grow stronger, and one day, he would fully embrace the powers and responsibilities he had been given. His mother's memory would guide him, and the fire of the Shirai Ryu would lead his way. For now, he would keep this discovery to himself. But one day, when the time was right, he would let the world see the true strength of Izuku Midoriya, the boy who carried the legacy of two ancient clans. Title: Midnight Training. Location: Dreamscape, Shirai Ryu Temple. As the young Lin was sleeping, Izuku Midoriya found himself in the familiar yet otherworldly setting of the Shirai Ryu Temple. The sky above was a swirling mix of fiery oranges and reds, casting an intense glow over the stone courtyard. The air was thick with the scent of burning embers, a constant reminder of the fire that burned within him. He was dressed in the traditional robes of a Shirai Ryu warrior, the fabric light yet durable, allowing for swift movement. He glanced around, half expecting to see Hanzo Hasashi, his great-grandfather, Shirai Ryu Scorpion, emerge from the shadows as he often did in these dreamlike meditations. But tonight was different. There was a distinct tension in the air, a sense of anticipation that made the hair on the back of Izuku's neck stand up. From the shadows, a figure emerged, but it wasn't Hanzo. Instead, a tall, imposing figure stepped into the light. His body was encased in bright yellow armor with black accents, his face obscured by a mask with red eyes that glowed ominously. Izuku's breath caught in his throat. He recognized the figure. Cyrax, a legendary warrior of the Kuei, now transformed into a cybernetic assassin. Midoriya, Cyrax's voice was deep and mechanical, resonating with a metallic echo. You carry within you the blood of both the Shirai Ryu and the Lin Kuei. The fire that burns in you, and the ice that you wield, are legacies of these two clans, bound by a history of bloodshed and war. Izuku swallowed, his mind racing. Cyrax, you're Lin Kuei, aren't you? Why are you here? Cyrax's red eyes glowed brighter as he stepped closer, his movements smooth and precise, a testament to his enhanced nature. I am indeed Lin Kuei, and though my body has been altered, my loyalty remains with the clan. But I am here not to fight you as an enemy, but to test your strength. You possess powers that have roots in both our clans, and you must learn to control them, to balance the fire with the ice. Izuku felt a chill run down his spine. This was a test, one that he hadn't expected. But he also felt a strange sense of excitement. He had always been driven to become stronger, and this was a rare opportunity to learn from a warrior as skilled as Cyrax. What do I need to do? Izuku asked, his voice steady despite the nervousness that churned in his stomach. Cyrax tilted his head slightly, his red eyes narrowing. We will spar. You will use your powers, fire, ice, and smoke. Show me what you've learned. I will not go easy on you. Izuku nodded, a determined look in his eyes. I'm ready. Without another word, Cyrax lunged forward, his movements a blur as he closed the distance between them in an instant. Izuku barely had time to react, his instincts kicking in as he summoned a blast of ice from his hands, aiming to freeze Cyrax in his tracks. Cyrax countered with a swift kick, shattering the ice before it could fully form, sending shards flying in all directions. Izuku quickly followed up with a burst of smoke, engulfing the area in a thick cloud. Using it as cover to reposition himself. But Cyrax was relentless. He activated a set of hidden thrusters in his armor, propelling himself through the smoke with ease. His fist shot out, aiming for Izuku's midsection, but Izuku was quick to raise a barrier of flames, forcing Cyrax to leap back. Good, Cyrax said, his voice a mix of approval and calculation. But you need to be faster. Izuku didn't have time to respond. Cyrax was already on the move again, this time launching a series of rapid-fire energy nets from his arm. Izuku dodged the first few, but one of them snagged his leg, holding him in place. Focus, Midoriya, Cyrax called out as he prepared to launch another attack. Izuku's heart raced as he struggled against the net. The fire within him surged, and with a powerful burst, he incinerated the net, freeing himself. He then combined his ice and smoke abilities, creating a swirling vortex of freezing mist that spiraled toward Cyrax. Cyrax's sensors detected the incoming attack, but before he could react, the icy vortex engulfed him, freezing his limbs in place. For a brief moment, Izuku thought he had won, but Cyrax's armor emitted a pulse of heat, melting the ice and allowing him to break free. You're improving, Cyrax said, his tone almost approving. But remember, control is key. You must learn to balance these powers, to use them in harmony, not just in succession. Izuku nodded, panting slightly from the effort. I understand. I'll keep trying. Cyrax watched him for a moment, then lowered his stance, signaling a temporary halt to their sparring. You have potential, Midoriya. But potential alone is not enough. You must continue to train, to refine your abilities. The path ahead is long and filled with challenges, but with the right guidance, you can overcome them. Izuku absorbed the words, feeling the weight of them settle in his mind. He was determined to prove himself, not just to Cyrax, but to the memory of his mother, to the legacy of his ancestors. This was just the beginning. Cyrax stepped back, his form flickering slightly as the dreamscape began to shift. We will continue this training, Midoriya. But for now, rest. Your journey is far from over. Izuku nodded, feeling the world around him begin to fade as the dream slowly loosened its grip. But as the darkness began to close in, he could still hear Cyrax's voice, clear and unwavering. Remember, Midoriya, The true strength of a warrior lies not in the power he wields, but in the heart that guides it. With those final words echoing in his mind, Izuku let the dream fade, knowing that the next time he faced Cyrax, he would be ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Title: The Road to Mastery. Location: Mitsuki Bakugo's home. Early morning. Izuku Midoriya woke up with a start, the echoes of Cyrax's words still resonating in his mind. The dream had felt so real, the heat of the Shirai Ryu temple, the intensity of the sparring, and the weight of the responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. He couldn't just brush it off. It was a call to action, a reminder that his powers required not just talent but relentless effort to master. As the first rays of dawn filtered through the curtains, Izuku carefully sat up, casting a glance at Bakugo, fast asleep in the bed next to his. Sharing a room with him was never easy. Any sound could trigger his temper, but this was the only place Izuku had after his mother was killed. He quietly slipped into his training clothes, making sure not to disturb Bakugo, and crept toward the door so he could go to the backyard. The Bakugo family's backyard wasn't large, but it was secluded enough for Izuku to practice without drawing too much attention. He began with stretches, warming up his muscles, preparing his body for the rigorous training ahead. The dream had been a reminder of the work he still had to do, especially in mastering the delicate balance between his fire, ice, and smoke abilities. Izuku started with his smoke powers, focusing on the moves that Cyrax had demonstrated in the dream. He moved fluidly, creating clouds of smoke around him, using it to obscure his movements. The smoke responded to his will, swirling around him, forming shapes, and dissipating just as quickly. He practiced phasing through the smoke, allowing it to carry him to different points in the yard, honing his speed and agility. Next, he moved on to his ice abilities. He held out his hand, focusing on the cold energy within him. A chill ran through his veins as ice crystals began to form at his fingertips, growing into sharp shards that he could control with a thought. He practiced creating barriers, walls of ice that would rise up in an instant, and then shatter with a flick of his wrist. He also worked on precision, forming small, delicate icicles that he could manipulate with exacting control. The fire was the most difficult. It was new, raw, and still tied closely to the grief and anger he had felt when his mother died. But Izuku knew that he couldn't let those emotions control him. He had to be the one in command. He focused on the warmth within him, the fire that had been passed down through his lineage from the Shirai Ryu. Slowly, flames began to flicker to life in his palm, small at first, but growing as he fed them with his energy. The fire roared, casting a warm glow in the cool morning air. Izuku experimented with different forms, blasts of fire, whips of flame, and controlled bursts that he could direct with precision. But each time he used it, he felt the strain, the emotional toll that it took to keep the fire in check. He pushed through, reminding himself that this power, like the others, was a part of him. It wasn't just about destruction, it was about protection, about using it to defend those he cared about. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. Sweat poured down Izuku's face as he continued his training, refusing to stop until he had gone through every move, every technique he had learned. He practiced combinations, switching between his ice, smoke, and fire abilities seamlessly, pushing his limits, testing his endurance. His muscles ached, his body cried out for rest, but Izuku kept going. He remembered Cyrax's words, the importance of control, the need for balance. He couldn't afford to be reckless with his power. The path he had chosen was not an easy one, and it required not just strength but discipline and dedication. Finally, when he could barely stand, Izuku allowed himself to stop. He collapsed onto the grass, breathing heavily, his body trembling from the exertion. But despite the exhaustion, there was a sense of satisfaction, a quiet pride in knowing that he had pushed himself, that he had taken another step forward in mastering his abilities. As he lay there, Staring up at the sky, Izuku felt a renewed sense of purpose. His powers were growing stronger, and so was he. He wasn't just training to become a hero. He was training to honor the legacy of his ancestors, to make sure that their sacrifices weren't in vain. He thought about his mother, about the strength she had shown in raising him, in hiding her own powers to give him a chance at a normal life. He thought about Hanzo, his great-grandfather, who had endured unimaginable loss but had found a way to keep going, to fight for what he believed in. Izuku clenched his fists, feeling the fire within him ignite once more, tempered now by the cool control of his ice and the elusive nature of his smoke. He would keep training, keep pushing himself, until he could wield these powers with the same skill and mastery as those who had come before him. But more than that, he would use them to protect the people he loved, to ensure that no one else had to suffer the same losses that he had. With that resolve, Izuku slowly got to his feet, his body sore but his spirit unbroken. There was still a long way to go, but he was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Location: Mitsuki Bakugo's backyard, late morning. After a grueling session of honing his elemental powers, Izuku Midoriya knew that his training wasn't over. The sun was now fully up, casting long shadows across the backyard. The morning air was still fresh, but the promise of a warm day was evident as the temperature slowly rose. Izuku wiped the sweat from his brow, his muscles aching from the exertion. But he knew that mastering his powers wasn't just about controlling the elements. It was about being physically strong and agile, capable of handling any challenge that came his way. He was reminded of the dream-like encounter with Cyrax and the rigorous training he had undergone in that fiery realm. If he wanted to live up to his lineage, to honor the Shirai Ryu and the Lin Kuei, he needed to be in peak physical condition. He began his physical exercises, starting with a series of push-ups. His arms burned with every rep, but he pushed through, focusing on maintaining proper form. Each push-up was a testament to his determination, a reminder that he was working not just for himself, but for the legacy he carried. Next, he moved on to sit-ups, feeling his core muscles tighten with each rise. He kept his movements deliberate and controlled, making sure to engage every muscle. The pain was there, sharp and demanding, but Izuku welcomed it. Pain was a part of growth, a sign that he was pushing his limits. After several sets of push-ups and sit-ups, he transitioned to squats. His legs shook slightly as he lowered himself down and pushed back up, but he kept going, counting each one in his head. He imagined himself in the heat of battle, his body moving with the fluidity and precision of a trained warrior. The physical conditioning was just as important as the mastery of his quirk. It was the foundation upon which his strength would be built. Once he completed his exercises, Izuku stood up, his body drenched in sweat, his breath coming in heavy bursts. He knew he had to keep going, to incorporate everything he had learned in his dreams. His hand moved instinctively to the small blade hanging from his belt, the one he had found among his mother's and father's belongings. It was Hanzo Hasashi's blade, the very weapon that his great-grandfather had wielded in his battles as Scorpion. The blade was simple yet elegant, its edge sharp and deadly. The rope attached to it coiled around the hilt, ready to be unfurled at a moment's notice. Holding it in his hand, Izuku felt a connection to his ancestors, a bond that transcended time. This blade was more than a weapon. It was a symbol of his heritage, of the Shirai Ryu's fierce determination and unyielding spirit. Izuku took a deep breath and began to practice with the blade. He started with basic movements, slashing and stabbing at the air, getting a feel for its weight and balance. The blade moved like an extension of his arm, swift and precise. He could almost hear the echoes of his great-grandfather's battles, the clash of steel, and the roar of flames. He unfurled the rope, allowing it to stretch out as he swung the blade in a wide arc. The rope followed his movements, the blade cutting through the air with a deadly hiss. Izuku practiced the technique over and over, embedding the muscle memory deep within him. He imagined facing an opponent, using the blade to keep them at a distance, or pulling them in close for a finishing strike. His movements became more fluid, more confident, as he integrated the blade work with his physical conditioning. He combined the slashes with quick dashes, using his speed and agility to strike from different angles. He practiced wrapping the rope around his arm, using it to catch and redirect attacks. The more he practiced, the more he felt the legacy of the Shirai Ryu flowing through him, guiding his actions, sharpening his instincts. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Izuku felt the burn in his muscles intensify, but he didn't stop. This was more than just training. It was a test of his resolve, a way to prove to himself that he was worthy of the legacy he had inherited. The sweat dripped from his brow, mixing with the dirt on the ground as he continued to train. Finally, after what felt like hours, Izuku paused, panting heavily, the blade still firmly in his grip. His body was exhausted, every muscle crying out for rest, but his spirit was stronger than ever. He looked down at the blade, its edge gleaming in the sunlight, and felt a deep sense of pride. He was far from mastering it, but he was on the right path. Izuku sheathed the blade and coiled the rope neatly around it. He knew he had a long way to go, but each day brought him closer to the warrior he was destined to become. As he walked back towards the house, his body tired but his heart full, Izuku knew that the journey ahead would be filled with challenges. But with his ancestors watching over him, and with the strength he was building, he was ready to face whatever came his way. He would honor his mother's memory, embrace his father's legacy, and forge his own path. The blade at his side was more than just a weapon, it was a reminder that he was the heir to two powerful lineages and that he had the strength to carry them forward.